It was the tree at the bottom that saved them. They slid into the edge of the climbing wood of pines here stood, right up the mountain slope from the deeper, darker forests of the valleys below. Some caught hold of the trunks and swung themselves into lower branch. Some like the little hobbit, got behind the tree to shelter from the onslaught of the logs. Soon the danger was over, and spinning around among the bracken and pine roots far below. Well, that has got us on a bit, said Gandalf, and even goblins tracking us will have the job to come down here quietly. Difficult to send stones bouncing down on our heads. The dwarves, said Bilbo, were feeling far from happy, and were rubbing their bruised and damaged legs and feet. Nonsense, we're going to turn aside here out of the pass of the slide. We must be quick, look at the lights. The sun had long gone behind the mountains already, through the trees and over the black tops of those growing plains beyond. They limped along now as fast as they were able to, down the gentle slopes of a pine forest, in a slanting path leading steadily toward southwards. At times they were pushing through a sea bracken there was tall fronds rising up right above the hobbit's head. At times they were marching along quiet over a floor of pine needles and old that the while the forest gloom got heavier and forest silence deeper. There was no wind, and that evenings to bring even a sea sighting into the branches of the tree. Must we go any farther? Said Bilbo, when it was so dark that he could only see just the Sorin's beard wagging beside him, and so quiet that he could hear the dwarves breathing like a loud noise. My toes are all bruised and bent, and my legs ache, and my stomach is wagging like an empty sack. A bit further, said Gandalf. After what seemed ages farther, they came suddenly to an opening where no trees grew. The moon was up and was shining into a clearing. Somehow it struck all of them as not at all a nice place, although there was nothing wrong to see. All of a sudden they heard a howl away downhill, a long shuddering howl. It was answered by another away to the right and a good deal nearer to them. Then by another not far away to the left. It was wolves howling in the moon, wolves gathering together. There were no wolves nearing Mr. Baggins' hole at home, but he knew the noise. He had it described to him often enough in tales. One of his elder cousins on the Took side, who had been a great traveler, used to imitate it, was too much for Bilbo. Even magic rings are no match used against wolves, especially against the evil packs that lived under the shadow of the goblin-infested mountains. Over the edge of the wild, on the borders of the unknown, wolves of that sort smell nearer than goblins, and do not need to see to catch you. What shall we do? What shall we do? He cried. Escaping goblins to be caught by wolves, he said, and it became a proverb, though we now say, out of the frying pan into the fire. Up in the same sort of uncomfortable situations. Up the trees, quick, called Gandalf, and they ran to the trees at the edge of the glade, hunting for those that had branches fairly low or were slender enough to swarm up. They followed them as quick as ever they could. You can guess, and up they went as high as ever they could trust the branches. You would have laughed from a safe distance if you had seen the dwarves sitting up in the trees with their beards dangling down like old gentlemen, gone cracked irons playing at being boys. Phil and Killy were at the top of a tail launch like an enormous Christmas tree. Dory, Nori, Ori, Owen, and Glowin were more comfortable in the huge pine with regular branches sticking out on intervals like the spokes of the wheel. Biffer, Buffer, Bomber, and Thorin were in another. Darwin and Bowen had swarmed up a tall, slender with few branches and were trying to find a place to sit in the greenery of the topmost boughs. Gandalf was a good deal taller than the others, had found a tree into which they could not climb, a large pine standing at the very edge of the glade. He was quite hidden in its boughs, but you could see his eyes gleaming in the moon, and he peeped out. And Bilbo, he could not get into a tree, and was scuttling around from trunk to trunk like a rabbit that has lost its hole and has a dog after it. "You've left a burglar behind," said Dory to Dory, looking down. "I can't be always carrying burglars on my back," said Dory. "Down tunnels and up trees. What do you think I am, a porter?" "You'll be eaten if you don't do something," said Dorian, for there were holes all around them now, getting nearer and nearer. "Dory," he called. From Dory was lowest down in the earliest tree. Bidquiff and Mr. Baggins a hand. Dory was quite a decent fellow in spite of his grumbling. Poor Bilbo could not reach his hand even when he fought. He climbed down to the bottom of the branch and hung his arm down as far as he could. So Dory actually climbed out of the tree and let Bilbo scramble up and stand on his back. Just at the moment, the wolves trotted howling into the clearing. All of a sudden, there were hundreds of eyes looking, glaring at them. Still, Dory did not let Bilbo down. He waited till he had clambered off his shoulders into the branches, and then he jumped for the branches himself. Only just in time. A wolf snapped at his cloak as he swung up, and nearly got him. In a minute, there was a whole pack of them yelping all around in the tree and leaping up at the trunk, with eyes blazing and tongues hanging out. But even the wild wargs, for so that evil wolves over the edge of the wild were named, cannot climb trees. For a time they were safe. Luckily it was warm and not windy. The trees were not very comfortable to sit in for a long and at any time. But in the cold and the wind, with wolves all around below waiting for you, they can be perfectly miserable places. This glade in the ring of the trees was eventually a meeting place, at the foot of the tree in which Dory and Bilbo were, and then went snuffling about till they had smelt out every tree that had anyone in it. These they guarded too, while all the rest, hundreds and hundreds it seemed, went and sat in a great circle in the glade, and in the middle of the circle was a great grey wolf. He spoke to them in dreadful language of the wargs. Gandalf understood it, Bilbo did not, but it sounded terrible to him, and as if all their talk was about cruel and wicked things. As it was, every now and then all the wargs in the circle would answer their great chief all together, and their dreadful clamor almost made a hobbit fall out of his pining tree. I will tell you what Gandalf heard, though Bilbo did not understand it. The wargs and the goblins often help one another in the wicked deeds. Goblins do not usually venture far from the mountains, unless they're driven out and are looking for new homes, and are marching to war, which I am glad to say has not happened for a long while. But in those days, sometimes used to go on raids, especially to get food or slaves to work for them. Then they often got the warges to help and shared like the plunder with them. It seemed that a great goblin raid had been planned for the goblins. Planned for that very night. The wargs had come to meet the goblins, and the goblins were late. For that reason, no doubt, was the death of the great goblin, and all the excitement caused by the dwarves and Bilbo and the wizard, for whom they were probably still hunting.